Well, hey everybody. So I'm Greg Smith, and this is Gersh, and we are representing the Mixer team here today. You may have seen our lovely logos kind of displayed everywhere, but we're actually really excited today to talk to you about game design with sub-second live streaming. So we're going to touch on a bunch of topics, but basically, audience interactivity with live streaming is a brand new frontier for game design, and while we think it's still early days, there's a lot of opportunity here, and we've learned a ton of things along the way. So we're going to talk more about, what the opportunity is like, what we've learned. There's going to be a little LARPing section as well, and there's going to be some audience interactivity, so, be on your toes and be ready. Yeah, exactly. And then we're going to actually talk about how you can start incorporating this into your game with the existing set of tools and SDKs. So before we launch into kind of the opportunity, how many people here, how big do you think the audience is for people who watch game video? Show of hands. Do you think it's 100 million people a year? Show of hands. 200, 300, 400, 500? What about 600? So it is actually, this year, 660 million people watch game video. And they spent 44 billion hours watching. And when you think about this, this is like Netflix level viewing. And of course, where this becomes really important is, how do you think about this as a game designer? How do you get people to discover your game? And what makes this even cooler is, by 2020, this number is going to grow to 1 billion people. 1 billion people. Oh wow, look at that, it's magical. And they're gonna spend even more time. And if this is the low friction way that folks are experiencing gameplay for the first time, really the thing we all should be thinking about is, how can we use this opportunity, this incredible engagement, to help people discover your unique game. So we're gonna have Gersh actually talk a little bit about kind of the game discovery process and his own experience as an independent developer.
Thanks, Greg. So what I want to do is, I want to start with a question that's going to be a show of hands. How many people were making games in the early 2000s? Please, somebody raise their hand. Okay, all right. Because I look like I'm in high school, but I feel older. So so I was making games back then, and you'd spend, if you were doing that, you'd spend 90% of your time building a game engine, and then you get to spend about 10% of your time building your game. And that's when I left the games industry and I came to Microsoft, because I thought that things could get better, and I said that if we could just make it so that people could easily build games, so you can focus on the design aspects, on the creative aspects of your game, then I think we get much more diverse games. And this was before app stores, before an open program. So you want to click?
Yeah, sure.
So here's the product that we worked on at Microsoft. And raise your hand if you've used XNA or heard of XNA. Okay. So XNA led the way to a lot of things. A lot of people don't know this, but it led the way to monogame, of course. Unity actually kind of got founded off of XNA. And the first open app store, which then we had a whole bunch of open app stores, like the ones that we have. Of course, iOS was a huge one, and so on and so forth. And now it's kind of like, if you've been listening to kind of the presentations today, it turns out that I was wrong. I think a lot of us were wrong in that lowering the barrier to entry to making games wasn't actually the biggest challenge. And I think the biggest challenge is kind of right in front of us right now, which is around discovery. And so a lot of you, all of you in the audience, are making, I promise you, they're great games, but probably a lot of you, like me, because I'm still an independent developer, are so worried and frustrated and trying to understand how we can get those great games to the right audience that we know can enjoy the message that we're trying to share with the world. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to hand it back over to Greg.
Yeah, so remember that number, 660 million people watching. But the question is, what are they watching? And we need to look at this a little bit historically. So, back maybe like a decade ago, it was video on demand, let's plays, trailers, walkthroughs. And this is still relevant today, but, we've seen the technology change where live streaming has come about, where now as an audience member, I don't just communicate with these creators and experience games asynchronously. I'm able to experience it relatively live. I'm able to chat, I'm able to be part of this community. And it's great because it introduces me to content that I would never have had access to before. But really, where things are all moving, it's where game video actually mirrors gameplay itself, where I'm in this kind of one single session, and it's not just chatting, it's not just watching, it's about moving from a viewer to being a participant. But the way this is going to happen is there's a couple things that need to happen. One is we need to make sure that video latency gets low enough that if I am interacting with some experience and I perform an action, that I actually see feedback in a reasonable amount of time. One of the challenges today has been, well, if I click a button or I perform some action and I don't see anything happen for 15 to 30 seconds, then it's fallen out of the loop. I don't really know if my action had any impact on what I was watching. So that's one thing. The next thing is making sure there is a rich set of tools and graphical commands that I as a viewer can participate in. So that way, regardless if I'm on my PC, I'm on my phone, or I'm on my console, that I can take a meaningful role within a playing experience. And then the last thing really is, as a game developer, I need to have my own set of tools and really consider how this audience of people who could be as small as a few people to in the thousands, what does it mean for them to be in my game, and how can I take advantage of them and turn again viewers into participants into players? And where we kind of start to see this world happen is on Mixer. So this is just a quick screenshot of one of the games we announced that integrated with our platform. So this is Telltale with their crowd play system. And in this example, we actually see the audience is a real participant in the gameplay. They are playing and performing the same actions that the player is. So now you suddenly have this group of people who may not even own the game, but now are able to not only watch and not only chat, but are able to meaningfully interact in a core part. But this is just one example, and one of the things we've learned with this being a brand new kind of type of game design, there's a lot of challenges and a lot of misconceptions that we have to get past in order to iterate and actually design experiences that are really, really fun. So what Gersh and I are going to do right now is, this is what I call the LARPing section. So we're actually going to kind of go through a variation of a lot of the conversations that we've had with game developers throughout this process. We've talked about this kind of game design and kind of work through, what Gersh as the game designer is thinking, what I as the platform person am thinking, and how we can kind of come together and build a really, really cool experience. So Gersh, yeah, tell me about this game that you're looking at.
Absolutely. So I'm here at DevGam, and my game concept it's an infant runner. So
Okay.
maybe you've heard that before. But this infant runner is kind of a horror game. So the world is peaceful and it's very quiet, but somewhere in some remote country there is word of a disease breaking out.
Okay.
And this disease is turning zombies into humans.
Okay.
So you have to pick up your family and run away before you get turned into a human, and then have to work a boring desk job, and you're not immortal anymore. Mm-hmm. So that's my game concept.
Okay. So it's interesting. So it's a little different than, I guess, what I've seen out in the market right now. So obviously, Mixer is an interesting opportunity, or just audience interactivity is a cool way for people to discover this. But how do you think the audience would participate? Like, why would they actually be interested in something like this?
Yeah, good question. So I think so this is an infant runner, and you can fall down holes and then you die. And so what if the audience can revive the player? So when the player dies, the audience, or actually, no, how about what if they can actually place traps in the player's way?
Okay.
So they can kind of play against the broadcaster, and so it's sort of broadcaster against the viewers. How about that?
That's an idea. So one of the things we've learned with game design is everyone's first idea is, hey, let's troll the broadcaster. Let's allow the audience to go in and make their life horrible. If this is Minecraft, let's find a way to drop a volcano in the middle of their town. But one thing we found, well, first of all, it's really funny when it happens at first, but the problem is it's only funny for a little bit, and it's only entertaining for a little bit. We actually found that experiences tend to be a lot sticky when you're able to put the broadcaster and the audience on the same team, and actually have them have shared stakes and shared rewards. And then there's a lot more emotional investment, not only in what the broadcaster is doing, but in the content itself.
Thanks, Greg. That makes a lot of sense. I don't know how many of you in the audience have kind of thought about how to design your game to be great for streaming, but it's true. Like if I put my viewers and broadcasters against each other, that kind of creates an awkward situation where the viewers maybe don't want to come back. Maybe they start getting angry at the broadcaster. That's not great. So how about this? What if instead, when the broadcaster dies, then someone in the audience can if they do it within 5 seconds, they press a revive button, then they revive the broadcaster, and they get to keep playing.
Okay, that's better. You know, it's not trolling, but again, just because though there's an audience involved now and they're helping them, we still need to have stakes. Just, you know, with any game design, there has to be some scarcity of resources. It can't just be that if I'm a broadcaster, I can even just hop in my own channel and essentially just nerf the game and make it easy for me to win. So what we have to think about doing is the audiences, they can't just be viewers and they can't just be kind of gods that change the game. They need to be players themselves.
Okay, so if I can kind of play back what you're saying that if it's a gimmick, if it's kind of cheap, it'll wear off. And so I actually have to really think about game design almost like the viewers are actually like players in my game.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And I think that last point is one that a lot of us are scared when we think about, like, well, how do I, I'm not a streamer, I'm not somebody who maybe watches a lot of streams. How do I build a compelling game for a streamer? And I think the good news is it's the same way with this evolution of live streaming where the audience is participating. And we really do believe that that is the next evolution of live streaming, not just our platform. That the good news is that you actually take all those things that you are great at, you just game design, and you just consider the audience. There's just more players that you have to consider. So with that, what if players instead get these ladders or bridges,
Okay.
and when the broadcaster is running across what they normally would have to jump across a gap, if you could drop a ladder, but you had to place it in a certain angle to either help them climb up an obstacle, but if you place it the wrong angle, maybe it falls down and it doesn't do anything, and then it takes some time to build these ladders.
Okay, that's cool. So that's good. So we're giving them different roles and different things to do. But one thing you should be thinking about is when you're building a game, you usually know the platform that it's targeted on. You know, if I'm playing on a console, I know I'm going to be using a controller. If I'm on a PC, I have a mouse and keyboard. But when you think about audience interactivity, you actually don't know what device they're going to be on. If I'm, in this scenario, if I'm watching on a mobile device, I'm not going to have a keyboard attached to it. I'm going to have to deal with touch controls, and I'm going to have different capabilities. And just even thinking about screen size as well, there's only so much information that I can fit, on a 5-inch screen, versus my, 20-inch 4K monitor. So a way to think about it is really about how do you divide your audience up into different groups and different roles and actually know where they're coming from.
Oh, I didn't actually know we could do that. So you're saying that I can divide the audience, I can actually show the audience different controls?
Yes.
Okay, in that case, I'll create...
Mixer plug.
In that case, I'll show each person in the audience a different type of tool that they can build. So some people can build ladders, some people have duct tape, some people have grenades.
No, that's awesome, but there is one thing you should think about here too. So I'm a user and I'm performing actions, and just like, in a game, I know when I click a button or I perform something, I see immediately on the screen what happens. So I have that satisfaction of that user feedback. But the challenge is, if I'm in an audience of thousands of people, and maybe I'm the one who places that ladder perfectly, how do I know that it was me that did that?
Oh, that's a good point. So just like with any good game design, we heard a bunch of talks earlier today about the importance of UI. So what if when you place a ladder that kind of helps the player, we show that person's name from the chat so everyone can see that that person was the one who helped the player?
No, that's pretty good. But there's one other thing you might want to be thinking about. So, some people think of live streaming as ephemeral. I go in, I chat, and I leave. But, a key part of game design is there's a progression mechanic that as I go through the game, I'm accruing progress or accruing some kind of experience towards a set of goals or capabilities. So how would you add that to your game? I mean, why would an audience member want to come back and play your game specifically?
Well, what about this? And I'll bet this applies to almost everyone's game. All of our games have some kind of in-game currency, some experience. And so what if, do you allow people to gain experience for just watching so that they have more incentive to go buy my game and play my game?
Yeah, so, one of the cool things actually is, as a game designer and Mixer in particular, you're able to see at any point who's actually in the audience watching your game. And even more importantly, when someone performs an interactive action or does something important to the game, you actually know who it is. So not only are you able to, visualize that, but there's ways for you to actually build a progression system so that even if a viewer hasn't even bought your game yet, they can actually already be accruing meaningful progress towards it, which is another way to incentivize them to actually jump in and start playing.
All right, that's awesome.
Yeah. So one thing too, though, is while we've talked about some concepts that perform pretty well, a really important piece is really about how do you iterate quickly on these designs and how do you test it quickly. So one of the things we've, at least on Mixer, have really indexed on is you can't spend time making it work. You should be spending time making it fun. So actually, one of the things that we did, and we're going to show you right now, is a couple of the plugins we've built in Unity as well as Unreal 4 that make it super easy to get started building interactive concepts. So you can really be up and running in just a couple minutes. And of course, as an indie developer, you have a ton of things to do. You have very little time, and oftentimes you don't have a lot of people. So if you want to try this out and you want to take advantage of this, we believe it's really, really important that you can take anybody on your team, your most junior programmer, your intern, or a designer who may not even be as technical, and give them the ability to actually start trying out these new concepts. Because again, we really believe that this is a new frontier of game design. So what I'm going to do right now is actually, assuming I can make this work, we're actually going to show you some of the experiences of how you would actually make this experience interactive. So the first thing, if you're building something on Mixer, and oh, nice, let's see this. Oh, this may not go well. So the first thing here is you want to actually build your interactive interface. And while we just have buttons and joysticks that can be rendered visually, and I guess you really can't see all of this right now, it's going to be a problem. Okay, so it looks like we can only see half of this. But anyways, what I would do is I would go on here, I would create a scene in my interactive project, and I would drag on my buttons, joysticks, whatever controls I want to do. This is something you can literally accomplish in about 15 seconds, and I named my button called Health, and this is really, really important. Because now, let's say my game is in Unity. So all I've done is I've gone into my Unity editor, and basically what I'll do is I download the Mixer plugin, which is available on the Asset Store on GitHub. I bring it in. All I do is I drop in a prefab called the Mixer prefab right down here. And literally once I have that, it is so easy to make any object in my game interactive. And I'll show you an example. So right here, let's say I want to, in this infinite runner, I just start with a cube, but I want to actually add interactivity. Let's say in this case, I want to use the concept where I allow the audience to heal the cube or make it do something along the way. And literally all I have to do, once I've added in Mixer, there's essentially 3 lines of code. One, I call the Mixer interactive.go interactive method at the start of wherever my scene loads or whatever game object is going to kind of initiate things. That is going to spin up all the stuff that we need to do to connect to Mixer, including authentication, establishing the WebSocket, and all the message handling. And literally, if I want to see if a user clicked the button that said health, the one that I just created right there, literally all I have to type is if mixerinteractive.getButtonHealth, and then I add my logic for how it affects my game. We can do the same thing too with joysticks. So literally you can add interactivity into your game in essentially 2 or 3 lines of code. And we believe this is super important because, again, we want you to focus on making it fun, not just making it work. Because we believe especially that the independent designers and the indie groups in general are going to be the ones that really push the envelope on what this kind of game design means. And I really think we're in probably the next 6 months to a year, there's going to be kind of I'll call it the words with friends moment, where there's that one kind of smaller game that comes out and just becomes this massive success because they found a way to address this huge audience of players. So anyways, this right here is Unity, but I want to quick show you our experience that we just launched actually on Unreal 4, which is also available on GitHub. And here we just did this right at the blueprint layer. And again, you really can't, poop. Looks like it's partially cut off. But anyways, literally just as easy. You literally create a blueprint for a Mixer button, and you just attach it to whatever other blueprint node that you want. In this case, we have our health button, which is just a button. And then literally you can see where it says pressed. You drag that onto the other node, and you've essentially established a Mixer connection there as well. So the great thing here, again, is this is all work that can be done at design time by many different people on your team, and you can really focus, again, on how do you make this fun. So popping back to the presentation, because we want to make sure we have some time for questions. So let's sum up some of the things that we talked about here. One is that we want to make sure that we align the audience with the streamer, that there are shared goals and shared rewards, since those are a lot stickier. The next thing, we want to make sure that we're considerate of how the audience can have accessible roles, and those roles are meaningful, and they're diverse, and they can handle different devices. The next thing is making sure that as an audience member that I receive visual feedback when I do something. It's not just that I click a button and something maybe happens. I know that I did it and that I can be recognized. Because while I may not be streaming myself, I still want to be on stage and I still want to build a meaningful emotional connection with this title. And the last thing is really about building progress and making that progress permanent. Don't make it ephemeral. Because if I know that if I go back to this game by purchasing it or watching it again or playing it, and that I'll have actually retained progress, I'm going to be much more likely to do so. So, quick. One second. Apparently, PowerPoint does not want to work for me anymore. Awesome. So we did talk about how you can do it, and we just want to quick throw up, here's how you can actually get started. We have a bunch of plugins. We have obviously Unity, we have Unreal 4. We also have a C++ SDK as well, among a number of other ones that are on GitHub. And the big thing here too, if you want to get started on this, we already build for Win32 and Steam. We support the Universal Windows platform, and we also support building on Xbox, as well as other platforms to come. So, as you think about building these experiences, we want to make sure you can address as broad an audience as possible, and aren't necessarily constrained to any particular platforms. So I believe with that, and we want to make sure we have time for questions. I guess we are at questions. Boom. And also, by the way, for folks who are watching right now on Mixer, we will also be taking questions from chat.
So what are the things about consuming sort of streams? Is it's pretty low friction? I can sort of just go there and just jump in. Now what we're doing, we talk about making another kind of thin client, which now creates a little bit more friction because you have to encourage somebody to download the particular flavor of the player there for that, so they can then interact with the other experience.
You actually don't have to do that at all. So while we do support apps on iOS and Android, as well as an app on Xbox One, you can just go to the Mixer website itself, and as long as you're signed in, the whole set of interactive controls, for whatever game designs, those are available.
Any other questions from that? So you mentioned in the sales pitch it says sort of sub-second. So give us some idea of the latency delays and where do you build your data centers so for geographically to make sure you can follow on that promise.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the advertised latency for Mixer right now is 250 milliseconds end to end. We do have geolocated data centers all around the world so that we can drive as strong of or as low of a latency as possible. Of course, depending on where you live, if there's issues between the data center and kind of that last hop over to your actual local network, obviously that can inject some latency. But for the most part, we've seen pretty consistent sub-second latency. So, I mean, again, the nice thing about that is you can really design experiences around kind of instantaneous feedback for a user, where we see as long as you kind of stay under 1 second, it still feels very, very good. Like you click a button and you see what happens in the stream almost instantly.
And what tools and safeguards are there to stop some distributed denial of service or some way of sort of somebody spamming on stuffing your messages?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So we do have built-in throttling on the service. So that way, if the message volume gets too high, we'll just throttle it from the various web clients and devices that are coming in. Additionally, we're about to, I believe in the next couple months, also support aggregations. So basically, when your input gets up to a certain threshold, we'll be able to actually take those individual messages and kind of merge them together. Additionally, right now, the SDKs themselves do on-client aggregation. So that way, as a game, you're just having to just listen to the messages that come out, not actually do all the parsing and handling yourself. That's all handled for you by the SDK and plugin.
Great. Well, if there's no more questions, I believe, will you be staying around for the rest of the afternoon?
Yeah, we'll be hanging out.
Okay, so hang out upstairs. So round of applause. Thank you very much,
Thanks,
Mixed
guys.
team. Thank you.